to go through the papers this morning. It's Alpesh Patel from Prifinium Partners. Good morning, Alpesh.
Morning.
Russia shifts on Assad, says The Times, and indeed this comes just after the first show of unanimity we've had on the Security Council, with Russia and China agreeing to a statement at least which condemns what's going on in Syria.
After a veto which blocked any action whatsoever actually being taken by the world in Syria. When I think how many lives the Russians and the Chinese, who both used their veto on the UN Security Council, how many lives they sacrificed in the Second World War so this kind of thing would not happen, it's an absolute disgrace to the soldiers and the people in Russia and China who lost their lives fighting for freedom. And then the United Nations was set up, and then they use exactly the same mechanism which was established to stop this in order to allow this to continue. What also gets me is I've been to Damascus and you see all the supporters of Hamas there. Where the heck are Al-Qaeda and Hamas, supporters of Islamic terrorism, when they're very happy to bomb the rest of us, but they're not so good when it comes to saving Islamic lives? That's what I don't understand. And the final point, the Arab League, another disgrace. Happily let your people be murdered, but we don't want to step into that. But should any Western powers be looking to do something to save lives? Oh, no, you're just interfering, crusaders.
What do you think is behind the Russian and Chinese reluctance to follow behind Western nations and their condemnation in the first instance, and their reluctance to actually engage in the debate as to whether there should be intervention?
They don't want to set a precedent to how they want to conduct affairs in the territories within their own nations where they have problems, whether it's Chechnya in the case of the Russians, and thinking, right, well, if we allow outside interference into Syria, it's going to set a precedent when we want to roll in tanks and wipe out incipient democracy movements. And I say democracy movements because the headline is Vladimir Putin says Syrians must decide who runs Syria. And as was pointed out to me before I came in by someone, it'd be nice if Putin would allow Russians to decide who runs Russia.
And of course, the process, as it were, continues in Bab al-Amma with the militia now going into the area.
Well, what I've seen on the reports is it's protest is a small. I mean, they're freedom fighters, and they're being wiped out. They're being exterminated on a scale which is reminiscent of Bosnia. And before that, as I say, the Second World War. And it was only 70 years ago when you could have this kind of genocide and wiping out mass sections of a population, and you can get away with it.
Let me talk to you a bit about Greece. I am fascinated by this article in the Financial Times. We know that we have reported widely that 130 billion is now going to be released in parts to the Greeks as a second bailout. However, the breakdown of that figure suggests that actually very little of it goes to the Greek government, because it's all to do with bailing out banks in Greece and also compensating banks who have lent to Greece.
It's always been the problem with bailouts since the credit crunch of why is the money going to the banks? Very often it's lent by other banks indirectly through funds. And when it goes to the banks, it ends up shoring up their balance sheets and never actually gets to the places where and the people it's supposed to help. Now, one point is, well, why is it not going directly to assist Greek people, Greek employment and so on, but instead actually it's a notional financial calculation. It's well, we wiped off this much debt by giving the banks this much money, but is it actually making a difference to the real economy and to the Greeks?
Well, yeah, but of the 130 billion, we've got here 35 billion given to private bondholders, 23 billion to Greek banks, and 35 billion to ensure Greek banks can access liquidity from the European Central Bank. That doesn't leave a lot, does it?
It doesn't leave a lot for the people on the ground, because it's not about the people on the ground. It's to avoid a default, because the technical financial factors is what Europe has started focusing on, that they don't want to create the impression that Greece might default to the bondholders, it might not pay its debt. But that's not where the problem lies. The rich banks who might not get paid 100% of the money they've lent and might only get 80% isn't the problem. The problem is, and you speak to Greek people on the ground, as I do, who are unemployed, who are in fear of losing jobs, who are finding it difficult to put food on the table, and with no prospect of hope or opportunity. That's where the problem lies, and that's not what they're addressing. Helping bondholders get very rich big banks who were foolish enough to lend the money in the first place to get 100 pence in the pound or 100 cents in the euro instead of 80 is a ridiculous waste of money, because that money, it just goes into a black hole.
Can we just bring up that picture again, because I think the picture encapsulates an awful lot. The Financial Times. Because there we have the Greek finance minister clearly remonstrating with Walter Schäuble, the German finance minister, and in many ways this does encapsulate what has emerged as a great rift.
I think if you were Greek, you might think it's the German who's standing up saying to the Greek minister, get your house in order. Actually, what the issue here is, the Germans probably need to be a little bit more sensitive about how they handle the Greeks, because there is a danger that a nation already feeling humiliated feels more so. Equally, the Greeks need to be less sensitive about the fact that the Germans are helping them and telling them how things should be done, because most of this is German money. And when somebody's giving you money and saying, listen, we're working 24/7 to pay you money, it's about time the Greeks got a little bit less sensitive about how they're treated. But as I say, the Germans could do with probably a little bit more sensitivity about how they deal with the Greeks.
And of course the issue of unemployment is not limited to Greece, unfortunately. It extends to the EU, and this meeting in Brussels, which continues today, is hopefully going to address these growth unemployment issues that we're facing.
The worry is, if you're trying to cut public spending, then it's very difficult to keep unemployment numbers down. Give you two figures. HSBC and Barclays, both European banks, they announced profits, combined profits of about £27 billion for last year. £27 billion was their combined profits. If we could get the private sector not to just hoard those profits, because the private sector's got money, governments don't, but instead just create a few more jobs instead of creating greater unemployment by cutting their own staff. Just a few more jobs in terms of youth training. Cheap jobs doesn't matter, but some more private sector jobs, because the private sector at the moment, as I say, is hoarding this money. What that would do is it allow the governments to continue cutting their spending. That's fine. What the governments should be doing is encouraging those banks with the profits to increase employment, but the governments can do another thing instead of just cutting spending if they want to keep balancing their budget. It's just cut payroll taxes. So it encourages these banks and other institutions to employ more people, which they're not doing at the moment. The reason they're not doing it, it's so expensive, and that's why they're hoarding the money. But we want the private sector creating the jobs and not just waving a magic wand saying, oh, the government will do it, because the governments are already indebted. And we know the private sector can do this, because £27 billion, and I just picked two companies, let alone all the rest, hoarding profits.
And finally, Engelbert, is this a masterstroke, would you say, getting a 75 or 76-year-old to front the UK's entry to Eurovision?
Yeah, the thing is, people have made so much about his age. Now, I know it's because, as about 3 people have said before I even came in here, I didn't know he was still alive, and it's terrible when people say that of performers. But the great thing is, first of all, that he's able to do it, and he can probably move better and more flexibly than I can, and he's double my age. Let's just say he's double my age. Yes, no, it's not saying much. You haven't seen how badly I move, but I think it's great in terms of the age thing, and we're all told how we're all going to live a lot longer and so on. But it just shows you my time on the Eurovision Song Contest will come one day,
And that's it. Thank you very much.